Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, as always, glad you're back on the Investigative Journal on this Thursday, and today we're going to talk about the Pope's dirty past. And every time I start thinking I'm going to do a show about the Pope, I get really chills up my, all these visions go through my head about the genocides in the past and all these pedophile priests and all of the shenanigans the Vatican is involved with, along with the Jesuit order. Isn't this beautiful? Here we got a Pope who's with the Jesuits, so I can talk about both of them in the same breath. And boy, when I do a show like this, it's the Pope's dirty past. Don't think that this hasn't been said before. And nobody cares. I'm looking through, and I had to go through to research this a little bit. And I don't like spending time on these guys. I'm looking at him now. Picture this guy. He's got his hand up like he's your friend, wearing these stupid robes and the cross of Jesus. And he's a Satanist. I mean, this guy, and he wears white. He wears that little beanie hat when he's not wearing the martyr, which is an old occult hat from the old days. And every time I do a story like this, I have to look and see. A lot of this stuff has been covered in the news, the mainstream newspapers, and there's some of these mainstream online newspapers now, like the Daily Beast, the Daily Caller, the National Incentive for Humanity. I don't know. You can probably think of 100. Who knows who these people are? And they cover this story, and they give you some kind of idea. Well, this guy could have been involved in the Argentinian Dirty Wars. Well, why is it the dirty war? Every war's a dirty war. I mean, why is this one dirtier than any other? Give me some facts that, we know this. Look, I'm going to make a bold statement here, but if he's a Jesuit, he was in Argentina back then. You can bet he was behind some of the murders and all of the garbage going on there. And what will happen, though, is the way the mainstream will present this story, people who are on the true scale, like I always talk about here, the 1 to 10 true scale, 1 being you don't know shit, 10 meaning you've been studying things for a while and you really get an idea that the government and all these spiritual institutions, including and most notably the Vatican, are lying to you. So most people aren't even into the 5 category here, so they're not going to believe. They'll give this idiot the benefit of the doubt. And my goodness, how many Catholics will say, he just called the Pope an idiot. He's going to hell. Oh boy. You bet? I want to bet, because I've just had can you imagine a little conversation here? All right, I die, and I'm up there at St. Peter's gates, and he asked me, okay, we're going to let you in, but did you call the Pope an idiot? Yes. Okay, you can get in. You're first in line. Get him to the front of the line. He's in. That's what'll happen. So, call the Pope an idiot, and you get to heaven right away. All right, Greg, let's get serious here. A couple announcements before we talk about the dirty Pope. Or wait, the dirty poop or the dirty Pope? Okay. On Monday, 7 p.m., I believe it's Pacific time, 10 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to do a live YouTube, so you can call in or you can chat with all your questions. And it's going to be basically a show where you answer. I very rarely take questions anymore. I used to do shows every day where people would call in, and I got sick and tired of it. And to be honest with you, it was either people that were your kind of like your fan club that believe everything you say, or it was people that were COINTEL people trying to say that I was some kind of operative from the CIA or Mossad. And I'd be doing a story. This is why I stopped questioning. Well, I do it every now and then. I'd be talking about some subject, like, okay, the empire's greatest, let's see, how about if I was talking about Pope Francis and child abuse? Then the guy'd call in and he'd go, hey, I want to ask you about 9/11. Well, can you at least stay on point here? I mean, and then it would get so ridiculous that, it was just a waste of time, to be honest with you. And in a sense, a lot of these talk shows are a waste of time. And the point is that, what do you want to call in for? Unless you've got a really good question, or you want to talk, like, what I'm going to do is basically just get on the live stream, and then you can ask me any damn question you want. How's that? That way, I won't get upset that you're not on point, and you can have no pressure whatsoever. You can ask me things like, when's the last time you took your dog in to get a worming or something? I don't care. Or you can get to the serious questions. Well, that's serious. You can ask me about anything, and I'll see if I can answer it. And if I don't like it, I just won't answer it. It's my show, right? Might as well be honest. But anyway, so that's Monday the 27th, 7 p.m. Pacific time, and you can look on YouTube. Go to my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com, and you can get the link, because and then the subscribers, they get a link, so you know when to go. So how do you find somebody? I remember, and before I get to the dirty poopy, okay, reminds me of when I was a kid, always told me, don't say the words P or P. Say one or two. I got to go number one. I got to go number two. I used to get up in class and go, I got to go number three. And they'd say, what's that? I'd say, what's 1 and 2 combined? 3. Okay. So you can either go 1, 2, or 3. I'm sure that really matters in the world we're talking about today, right? It's about as interesting as what we're going to talk about today with the dirty Pope who wears white. And so go. It's August 27th, 7 p.m. And so you can I'll have a Skype number you can call, or you can use a chat. You can ask me the questions on chat, and that might be as easy as, you don't have to be long. Just ask a simple question. Even what day is it? I'll answer that. I'll try to answer that. So today, the Dirty Pope, this story has been covered all over the place when he first became the head of this satanic organization, and the head of all these criminals who bow down to him and kiss his ring, because he is the head of this, he's Pontifex Maximus. And they always make him out to be this wonderful guy, no matter what pope it is, and they all turn out to be idiots. I remember when I was in Rome, it was during the era of John Paul II, after they just killed John Paul I because they didn't like him. They did their own investigation, by the way. And he was Polish. Now, I'm Polish, so I go to Italy, and I'm there, and these Italians, as smart as they are, looked at me and said, you look like the Papa. I said, really? He said, and I know why you're here. Why? You're here because you're the illegitimate son of the Pope. You're Polish. You look like him, and you're here to get all his money. That's what they told me. And then, when you find out that Pope Paul II, whatever his name was, the Polish Pope, he was, what did he do during World War II? He was a cyanide salesman. And he was involved in all of the horrendous things going on. So he was no good guy either. And they have it's crazy. I remember the two really crazy things is, how is this guy considered the king of the world? And how is he considered Christ on earth? Now, most people think that the Catholic Church has always considered the Pope to be the vicar of Christ. Well, that's not true, because this didn't happen till a maniac Pope in the 1800s decided he was Christ on earth because he had visions. And so he had to get the other cardinals to agree, and they wanted to put him away in an insane asylum, basically. But they couldn't because he got the Jesuits behind him, and they strong-armed the cardinals, many who said, this is crazy. The Pope is not God on earth. But in the Jesuits' wisdom, they strong-armed the cardinals to finally pass this law. So basically, here you got these idiots wearing red hats saying, now, I think it'd be good to, from now on, tell everybody that this is God on earth. And man, could we rake in the money. And that's what happened. They didn't exactly say it that way. And if you read a book, I've always loved this book. It's by I usually have it in front of me. But it's a great book called How the Pope Became Infallible. And it's by a former high-level Vatican priest called Bernard Hessler from Germany. And since we were speaking about Pope Paul II, he wrote the book. It was an incredible book, and it really documents well. I mean, in a very, very, very well-documented manner, how the Pope became infallible in the Vicar of Christ. And he did go through it. I mean, it's a very good book to read if you're really interested in how crazy these people really are. And he made a recommendation to Pope Paul II, and he had a number of bishops behind him, that this policy be looked at and perhaps changed. Now, to me, that makes a lot of sense, because his argument was this never should have happened anyway, and it was because of this, I'll be kind here, this Pope who was supposedly talking with God and had visions, that it ever came into being to begin with. But most Catholics, I did this once. I went to Catholic churches when I go to these little towns, and I, would be talking, and I'm always very nice. And, I went to Notre Dame High School, and I was treated very well by the Holy Cross Fathers. But do you know when the Pope became infallible? Has this always been? Oh, yes, this has always been the way it was. The Pope has always been God on earth. Nobody really knew. I didn't meet one person that knew anything about it. And they, obediently went down, prayed, stood up when the Pope rang the bells. When the little basket came by, they gave money. But they had no idea that this policy was ridiculous. And so this guy, Bernard Hessler, writes this book, beautiful, well written and well documented, good guy. And all he was saying to Pope Paul II was, listen, could you at least look at this? There's so many people that do not agree with this policy, and why don't we, in our next Vatican Council or whatever they do, why don't we see if we get it changed? Well, he sent that letter to Pope John Paul II, and I swear to God, within a month he was dead. And he was 40-some years old, in good health. And then I found it very strange that there was never any investigation about this death at all. Kind of like you never see the investigation about all the Clinton deaths, the people that die because they get to know the Clintons. Either it's they have a disease that's called, talk to the Clintons and you'll die within 24 hours from whatever they're breathing on you, or they have a hit team that takes care of people. And boy, when you go to the Clinton Chronicles and you look and you start researching how many people have died near them that knew things about them in the strangest of manners. For one, this guy had some information about Clinton's sex life when he was governor, or his drug use. And he ended up in a duffel bag in a number of different pieces. And the coroner in Arkansas, this is a true story, said that he committed suicide. Now, how do you commit suicide? What, do you cut your arms and legs off and stuff yourself in a bag? It's ridiculous. And the case is going, check it out. I'm not BSing you on that story. So this guy, he might have just been stuffed in a duffel bag. I'm not sure about all the arms and legs, but how do you kill yourself in a duffel? I mean, it's crazy. And there were worse stories. People getting shot twice in the head. They killed themselves. How do you shoot yourself twice in the head and then say it's suicide? I guess people have said it can happen, but I find it kind of difficult, especially when the bullets are both in the back of the head. If you can get off 2 rounds, let me know, William. Okay. So that's just another thing. So here we have Bernard Hassler, who wrote this book, How the Pope Became Infallible. Get it. I don't know if you can get it free. I have somebody gave me a copy, and it's really worth reading because it really shows you the ridiculousness of this idea that these guys are even close to Christ. But anyway, he ends up dead after sending the letter. I mean, days. This guy was gone. Because you cannot, maybe since Pope John Paul II was Christ, he just struck him dead right there. Like people say, God can just point his finger to you and you're dead. Maybe that's what he did. Okay, so there you go. So now that's a good intro here to what we want to do today. And that is, we want to talk about the poopy Pope and his connection to the Dirty War in Argentina. And I want to say this let's start here on the first few minutes by recapturing a number of these articles that came out in the mainstream. I mean, everybody covered this story. The New Yorker, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Daily Beast, all of these people. And they always laid doubt in your mind that he did this, but, there was always this idea that, well, you never can be sure. And the nice thing about this is that most people, when I say nice, I mean what's really good for most humanity, because if people knew the truth really, I don't think the world could exist anymore. I mean, if they really understood everything, I think this place would, I don't see how people could wake up in the morning and actually do anything. They would be stunned. They would be like statues going, oh my God, I can't move. This has all been a lie. So the truth can kind of put a damper on the unrealistic world that you really live in. And what could it do to the masses of Catholics who believe he's Christ? I mean, it would just destroy them if they really knew the truth. And then what they do when they read an article like The Pope's Dirty Past by Christopher Dickey in the Daily Beast, they go, oh my goodness, see, he's being persecuted just like Jesus Christ was. These people will do anything to persecute Christ. And that's how they view it. And isn't that nice? And he can sit up there, put little kids on his lap, and my goodness, don't sit on the Pope's lap, please, if you're a little kid. I'm going to not tell you why on the air, but don't do it. So he comes out like a martyr, right? Because he can't be involved in this stuff. He was really trying to help all these people. And that's how the Jesuits get away with it too. Oh, they're just martyr. Look at these bad people talking so badly about them. And then you got to put up with, for years, getting like hate letters from Catholics going, you hate Catholics. Something must have happened to you, Greg. I bet you were abused, and now you didn't get any money from them, and all you want to do is destroy their lives. That's what you got to put up with. When you try to just look and say, listen, get to the bottom, of these stories. You can have all the accusations you want, but the point of the matter is, let's put it on the table and not just dismiss it as this guy could never do anything wrong, or the Jesuits could never. They're just great educators, and they have nothing to do with any of the sickness that's going on in the world. Oh, really? That's really the error, and it's a great way to do. These guys have the best jobs in the world because they can be accused of everything, and there can be hard evidence, but they never get prosecuted, And to give you an example, I want to do this story about the Pope's dirty past in the second half hour because I only have 4 minutes. But let me comment a little bit about the American political scene. And yesterday I mentioned, this is really important because you know the Jesuit philosophy here of the Hegelian dialectic is at work. And it's really at work in the justice system, because if you watch what they're doing, they're looking at the system of justice as there's a two-tier system, let's put it that way. There's a hypocritical system going on, and it's geared to get people who, middle-class America who wants to, everybody's equal. The hands of justice are equal. They want to ingrain in their mind that, no, it's not. You're never going to have equal justice in this country, and get used to it. And that's what's going on in Washington right now, and Trump's involved in it. He's there just to be the sacrificial scapegoat. He's not going to go in, he's not going to jail. He's not going to get, he's just there. But all of the people, there's a number of people around him that really have done nothing outside of the normal tax evasion and all this stuff that would have never been charged, that are going to jail. Let me give you an example. One of his campaign guys, for 100 days he worked, was in solitary confinement for some tax charges. This is from their big special investigation about Russian collusion, which there isn't any that you can see, and this is orchestrated. But now you're getting the Justice Department, which has got an attorney general who's Republican. He does nothing. And that's why they put him in there. So you get all these guys like bowling pins falling down, going to jail, that knew Trump, right? And they're, the reason that they're being prosecuted is because of their association with them. Their crimes are basically white-collar stuff. And they never would have been prosecuted otherwise, because there's a lot of other white-collar people out there that are doing a lot worse. And the second guy, one of his personal attorneys, pleaded guilty recently to crime. There weren't any crimes. And his lawyer, who was the closest lawyer to the Clinton family, his name is Lanny something, makes his client plead guilty to crimes he never committed. There weren't any crimes. And the idea is that because he pleaded guilty, Trump is guilty, because Trump told him to pay off this porn star that he had sex with so she wouldn't talk. And basically it's not a campaign violation because it's his personal money, and it's done all the time. Especially with a guy like him. So there were no crimes to begin with. He pleads guilty to crimes. Then on the other hand, there are blatant crimes being committed by the Clintons and all of their people in the Obama administration. How about the time that Obama did violate the campaign financing laws, but you know what they did to him? They gave him a $300,000 fine. Now we got a guy going to jail because he knows Trump, who didn't even commit a crime. So they're doing this on purpose because they're allowing the Clintons and all of these people to go free who happen to be on the Democratic left. And then all the supporters of Trump are usually people like go to Walmart. They're middle-class people. They're the salt of America. They want to see people that, wake up every morning and think there's a fair system, and they're seeing right before their eyes there isn't. And really the reason it's being done is so they get used to it. That's the way it's going to be. Don't ever think you're going to get justice, because look at what's happening here. And you can't get this accomplished unless you've got a shill like Trump in there to play the patsy, to play this guy. And that's what he's doing. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
Okay, so let's get right at it here. We're talking, this half hour, we're going to talk about the Pope's dirty, poopy past in the Argentinian Dirty Wars, they call them. And I always said, what war hasn't been dirty? I mean, but anyway, that's what they call it. I guess every war has to have a name, you know, the big one, the Civil War. There's so many civil wars, I can't keep track. There's going to be another one here in America soon. And what are they going to call that? Civil War II, the sequel. Yeah, Hollywood will make a movie first, and then they'll copy the movie. You wonder sometimes who really controls these things. I think Hollywood, then they say, okay, we'll just do what they do. They do that with the moon. Hollywood does the fake moon stuff and all this fake stuff, and they go, hey, that looks good. And NASA goes back and go, we better not make it look too much like Hollywood. But it looks just like it. So, anyway, I digress. The Pope's dirty past. By the way, live stream August 27th, Monday. If you want to ask me questions, And we'll do that for as long as people ask questions, minimum of 45 minutes. So, maximum 45 minutes. And that's August 27th, YouTube. You can go to my website, greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com, and get the link. And you can either call in on Skype, I'll have a number for you, or you can text, chat with me on that. They got the chat forum set up. Okay, the Pope's Dirty Past. I'm going to take a little bit of information from the mainstream here because they covered the story. This story has been covered when he became Pope. And, of course, like I said, nobody, they go, hey, this guy's Christ on earth, he can't do these things. But this so-called dirty war in Argentina ended about 30 years ago. Wasn't Argentina the country, if I recall right, that many say that Hitler fled to with all of his top people? I mean, we know that hundreds of Nazis escaped, and money and gold and all this stuff, and they say that he ended up in Argentina and lived to be an old age. I don't doubt it, because he did not die in those bunkers, that's for sure, and neither did Eva Braun. And the way to solve this problem, because there has been a lot of controversy about whether Hitler died in the bunker or he escaped Argentina in a submarine. He'd been, some people say, yes, we've seen him there before he died. And the best way to solve it, they have a gravesite for him to get his DNA off that body that's down there, and they won't do it. So who are you going to believe? It's very simple. Go get that DNA. Now you can do that. And let's see if the body that's in the supposed Hitler gravesite or wherever they got him, and Eva Braun as well, and see if it's him. They won't do it. I mean, they'll do it for some obscure murder that happened 30 years ago, right? But they won't do it on Hitler. So I tend to believe that he's not in that grave. The so-called dirty war in Argentina ended 30 years ago. And the trials of the Argentinian military men accused of just horrendous crimes during that time are still going on. About 2 years ago, this woman was testifying, and she'd been tortured and raped in one of their concentration camps. And she was looking at the 44 men in the dock and the named sadists she remembered. The one who looked one that supposedly might have burned her breast with cigarettes. The one who tied her up whatever they're doing here. I don't even want to say it. And as the spectators in the court looked at the accused, they saw every one of the 44 was wearing a curious badge, white and yellow ribbons, the color of the Vatican, to honor the Argentinian Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio, who had just been named Pope Francis the night before. So here's this woman recalling being raped and tortured during the Argentinian Dirty War. And she's got to look at all these people wearing the Vatican colors when very well Bergoglio, or Pope Francis, was involved in a co-conspirator in all this stuff. So they weren't doing the new pontiff any favors, though, according to this article, because suspicions have surfaced many, many times over the years that Bergoglio was the young head of the Jesuit order in Argentina during the 1970s, and he took no effective stand against the systematic terror waged by the military, and may have indeed been complicit in it. Today, these dirty war stories are entirely at odds with the image of this humble, kindly old man who appeared on the balcony at St. Peter's, a man of the people, the poor, who cares deeply about these poor people, right? So the Vatican spin machine has gone really into high gear over this stuff. And on a couple of years ago, I remember the Vatican spokesman, Federico Lombardi, issued a statement claiming that the attacks on Bergoglio, on his reputation, were the work of left-wing anti-clerical elements who are always attacking the church. Didn't I tell you? That's what they would do. Just claim that he's a martyr. How could Christ on earth do that? You know, I remember a story when I was in Rome, and I was sitting with this high-level Vatican priest, and there just came a book out called, what the hell was it? A Holy Blood, Holy Grail, something like that. It was about the bloodline of Christ, and supposedly Christ was not killed on the cross, and he married Mary Magdalene, and they went to France and lived a happy life, and he has children. Okay, and his children still, the bloodline of Christ still exists in the form of this man who runs the group called the Priore de Sion, and he's in France, and he's still alive. And these stories were appearing all over Rome at the time. And I remember reading the book that just came out, and I was, at the time, kind of like an atheist, and I was thinking, I grew up as a Catholic. This story about Christ can be kind of, I don't know. I mean, it sounds kind of fishy to me. A guy, I didn't hear anything about him till he was 33 and all this stuff. So, sure, I was a doubting Thomas. And I'm saying, well, maybe these guys had some great information. Christ married Mary Magdalene. He ends up going to France. He never was on the cross. A lot of things can change in history. I mean, it happened a long time ago. There's no actually YouTube reports on it or anything, or any filmed reports back then, right? There were no even newspaper articles back then. So how do you know? So that's the way I was thinking back then. And so I said, this is a good story. How is the Vatican going to respond to the fact that these people are putting all these articles in the newspaper now saying that Christ never was killed on the cross, and here are all these, that's what the Vatican, that's how they make their money. I was sitting talking to the guy on a street where they sell all this stuff, crosses, holy water. I remember asking the guy, I said, do you just fill that up with water and then put holy water on it? Oh, no. The Father comes and blesses it. And I said, oh, really? Is that after he's drank a couple bottles of wine like me? Let me bless it. Now it's holy. So they make money on this stuff. And all these Americans and Canadians come running and paying. Guy bought a glass of holy water for about $20. I mean, now tell me that ain't a great business. I was thinking about starting one like that over there. I said, I'll get all these rosaries. I'll find all these people, and they'll give me these rosaries and all of these trinkets, and I'll say that this one was actually blessed by, make up all these stories, and it's cost $100. And, people are going to believe it, because that whole street right next to the Vatican was selling all these religious curios. I mean, and above were little shops, and occasionally you would have like a coffee shop that I was sitting in there. And so I got to know these people, and we had fun talking about it. One guy says to me, and I've told this story before, but it's worth telling, because, I can't take really doing a whole show on this poopy pope. So anyway, he says to me, do you know what the street really was before, right after World War II? It changed. They never sold religious stuff here. I said, well, what was it? They said, this is where the whorehouses were. On this side of the street was all the girls, and all the bedrooms were upstairs, and all the Vatican priests would come down there, according, as the political people too. And then on the other side of the street was the gay area, where all the gay people would go. Oh, really? How come it's not here? Well, after World War II, they had to change it. It was too close to the Vatican, so they moved it to another part of town. I said, where? They said, it's about 10 miles from here. I can tell you exactly where they go now. Okay. So I'm starting to wonder, because I went there and I said, maybe I could get closer to the church, because I grew up as a Catholic, right? Oh, boy. This guy set me straight. So I'm talking to this priest about this book. Father, how are you going to tell the people, about this? It's going to, that Christ didn't die. What are you guys going to do? And he looked at me and said, my son, First of all, the people can't really handle the truth, and I'm going to tell you the truth. I said, okay, thank you. What's the truth about this book? Is it real? Do you have in your Vatican archives that he never died on the cross and all this stuff? He said, my son, I can't reveal those things. But I can tell you this, that a left-wing anti-clerical element always comes out every few years. How long have you been here? I said, well, only a year. He said, every few years they come out and they try to destroy us with this kind of information. It's not true. And I said, well, what happens then? He said, well, we have to just rely on the truth and tell the story as we tell in our catechism books. I said, okay. Little did I know when I tried to really get to the bottom of the story, that actually there were elements in the Vatican or the Jesuit order that were actually planting these stories and creating this kind of chaos, doing that old Hegelian dialectic thing. So you have elements in the church doing this, and then they'd fight back and forth. And I found it hilarious. And if you go back to some of my shows, I give you the full story of how I went to France to try to find the guy who carried the bloodline of Christ, which I couldn't do. But it was a fun story. It gave me a reason to go to Paris. So, anyway, back to the Dirty Wars in Argentina that nobody talks about. You read it. When he became Pope, they had to talk about it. But like this Vatican spokesman, Federico Lombardi, said, this isn't true. This is the good Pope. The left-wing anti-clerical elements are always attacking us, just like they did back when I talked to that priest in the 1980s. He also noted that a Jesuit who was abducted and tortured by the Argentinian military in 1976 and who reportedly blamed Bergoglio for failing to protect him and possibly implicating him, had issued a statement saying they had been reconciled long ago. All right. So immediately now what people are going to say is, well, how could the Jesuits and him be involved in these wars when one of them was killed? Well, let me tell you, they can sacrifice their own so they can protect their name. And no better story than to go look for a priest right now named Father Dell'Oglio, Jesuit priest, who they said was killed by ISIS, right? But he'd been in Syria for years helping ISIS get started, is another take on the story. And guess what? A couple years after they said he was dead, he was found still alive. And that came out. They still haven't been able to really talk about this. But that gives me an idea that they do this all the time. They set up a guy, they'll kill him, and say, look, how could we be involved with this if our own are dying? Well, they'll kill their own to protect their good, to create a good name and keep their brand holy and clean. But in this article, the writer points out that the language of that statement was very carefully worded. It was even, one might say, Jesuitical. The priest in question is the Hungarian-born Father Franz Helix, who is now in his mid-80s, so he's a little older now, and living in a German monastery. As we have reported, and this was in the Daily Beast, Helix wrote eloquently in 1994 about his horrific experiences in captivity in Argentina and the many years of prayer and contemplation that it took before he could forgive the man who he blamed for what happened to him, the man he let others identify as Pope Bergoglio. So he's blaming the Pope, and here we go. Now they're trying to say they're going to try to discredit this guy somehow. The statement issued in Helix's name by the Jesuits in Germany, sure, of course, they're issuing their own proclamations here, today does nothing to clear up the facts of what happened in Buenos Aires in 1976. It only shows once again that Helix has indeed decided to forgive Bergoglio. Yeah, can you imagine behind the scenes? Forgive him or we'll kill you. Who knows? He was 80 years old anyway. But so the public story is he forgave him. And now he goes on to say, I cannot comment on the role of Father Bergoglio during that period. He notes that he celebrated Mass with him later, and as far as I'm concerned, the case is closed. He then wishes Pope Francis God's richest blessings for his office. Meanwhile, testimony in the ongoing trial, this was a number of years ago, of the 44 men charged with crimes against humanity in Argentina continues to raise serious questions about the Pope's performance amid the horrors that occurred in the past. Now, this is in the mainstream media. Can you imagine if you really wanted to get to the truth without speculating? It'd be god darn hard to do it. Just like it's ever hard to get to the truth about the Nuremberg trials. But there is one fact about the Nuremberg trials that should be thought about when you're thinking of this. When the United States, they sent our justice court, a judge, to oversee and to rule on the Nazis being put on trial after World War II in Nuremberg, right? The first really questionable thing here is most of the high-level Nazis had already escaped and were never put on trial. Secondly, you cannot find one of the many, many signs, signals, and words used by the Vatican back then that they were involved and supported the Nazi movement. That was all out of the court record. And thirdly, the judge was not alone when he came here. His overseer happened to be Father Edmund Walsh, a Jesuit priest who came with him to the Nuremberg trials. Now, that's never reported. And his role at the Nuremberg trials was to make sure the judge didn't screw up. So that's your history lesson on how you can't trust any of this stuff. So what do you think's going to happen here in these trials? You know, they're going to try every way possible to cover up Bergoglio and Pope Francis's complicity in the tortures, rapes, concentration camps, murders, and all of these crazy things that were going on. You know, to give you another idea to think about, when you go back to the horrors that happened in Russia, in Stalin's Russia, and the concentration camps that killed upwards of how many millions of Russian Orthodox, Jews, etc. in Russia. One thing that's never reported, that the head of some of the concentration camps was a Catholic priest that went to school with Stalin. That's you can find that, but that doesn't ever put in the history books because you're not going to get the truth. So how can anybody, if that would be reported, and if that is fact, how can anybody sit in a Catholic church? How can we even, allow the Pope to come here and we pay his bill? And how can we allow him to speak to Congress? This guy's could be complicit in rape and torture and murder in Argentina in 1976 and those years of that war, but we allow him to sit there and talk to our Congress? Are you kidding me? Well, no, I can understand it because they're all probably complicit in so much as well. So, according to the Human Rights Watch, there is little question that in Argentina, many senior churchmen, Vatican people, were complicit, this is fact, with generals. Argentine investigative journalist Horacio Verbitsky, in his book El Silencio, reports that one concentration camp was actually set up on church property, Catholic property, that had previously been used as a retreat by senior clergy. Now, let's give Bergoglio a break. Let's just say he was the head Jesuit, head person there. Now, if Horacio Verbitsky, in his book Silencio, can uncover this as fact, why would Bergoglio allow that to happen? He had to know that there was a concentration camp on church property, and if he was true and right, and he wasn't involved in this and wanted to stop it, he wouldn't have allowed that. But he didn't. In the 70s, he was on a fast track in the church hierarchy. He'd been made the Jesuit provincial in Argentina. And if you know the importance of Jesuit provincials, I do. Because I tried to contact every one of them here in America, and it's like harder to contact them than it is the Pope. Or, the president. I mean, there's Jesuit provincials, and they got this country all mapped out. You got to see how they organize it. And he was the head of the entire order there in 1973 when he was only 36 years old. And what's the specific allegations made about him is that he gained and kept that position for several years, not by taking responsibility and stopping the dirty wars, but by evading it and perhaps actually being complicit in them. Yeah, just like Pope Pius XII was complicit and Hitler's mentor. You see, they have a pattern here. To become Pope, you got to either be in bed with Stalin, Hitler, the Argentinian, everywhere you go, you're going to find the Vatican involved in these dirty wars, whether it be in El Salvador, whether it be in Syria, whether it be in Russia, in Germany, they're there. In Mexico, you name it. Now, testimony at the trial of the 44 military men focused on one particular set of crimes that remains like an untreated wound in the breast of many Argentinians. When pregnant women were disappeared by the military, they would be kept until their babies were born, and then the infants would be given away to couples the military deemed sympathetic. The relatives of those stolen children, the grandparents, aunts, and uncles, are still looking for them. Well, go to Pope. He's the God on earth. Ask him to help. Yeah, because he was involved in it. He ain't going to help. I'm crazy. I got about a minute here. Glad I looked. But in 1977, we'll get to this later. I only have a minute. So, the whole idea, talking about this poopy Pope, is that it follows a pattern of other situations that have occurred where the Vatican seems to get involved in these genocides and then seem to have a way to talk their way out of it. And you can look at go to Africa and look at a couple of the recent genocides there. And I talked to some people there from a couple of those countries, and the Vatican imprints are all over it. But if you can't get to the truth about what's going on in Argentina or in Europe, how are you going to get to the truth in Africa? Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.